I never thought I'd end up as a lighthouse keeper. Most people my age were chasing office jobs, startup dreams, or at least something that kept them connected to the world. But after my divorce and everything that followed, I needed silence. I needed distance. I needed a place where the only thing louder than my thoughts was the ocean. So when I saw the posting for a night shift keeper at the Halverson Point Lighthouse on the northern coast, I applied without thinking twice. Remote location, minimal human contact, decent pay, and a small stone cottage attached to the base of the tower. It sounded like exactly the kind of exile I was looking for. What I didn't expect were the rules. Every lighthouse has operational guidelines, of course. Maintenance schedules, log requirements, weather reporting protocols. Standard stuff. But Halverson Point came with a separate document, printed on yellowed paper and tucked inside the welcome folder beneath the foghorn maintenance manual. It wasn't typed. It was written by hand, in ink that had faded to a pale brown, in the careful cursive of someone who had taken their time choosing every single word. At the top of the page, underlined twice, were the words "Nigit Paradocals. Follow I Chautiex Sepidion." I remember laughing when I first read them. Alone in that cottage with the wind rattling the single pane windows and the Atlantic hammering the rocks below, I sat at the kitchen table and read through that list and actually laughed out loud. Because the rules were insane, not operationally strange, not bureaucratically unusual. They were the kind of rules that made the hairs on the back of your neck rise before your brain even finished processing the words. Rule 1. Never let the light go dark between the hours of midnight and 4 in the morning, even if the mechanism fails. If the mechanism fails, you go up and you turn it manually. You do not stop turning it. You do not come back down until 4. Rule 2. If you see a ship that does not appear on the radar, do not attempt to make radio contact. Log its appearance, log its heading, log the time, and do not look at it directly for longer than 3 seconds at a time. Rule 3. If a voice comes through on channel 16 that you do not recognize, and it gives you a name, do not repeat the name aloud. Write it in the log. Close the log. Do not open the log again until morning. Rule 4. There will be nights when you hear knocking on the cottage door after 2 in the morning. Do not open it. Do not speak through it. Do not look through the window beside it. Sit in the center of the room and wait until it stops. Rule 5. If a ship radios in a mayday and gives coordinates that place it less than a quarter mile offshore, and you cannot see it from the lamp room, do not go down to the rocks. Radio the Coast Guard. Log the call. Stay in the tower. Rule 6. Keep a written log of every vessel you guide safely to shore. Include the name of the ship, the time of contact, the captain's name if given, and the weather conditions. Review the log every Sunday morning. If any entry has changed from what you wrote, call the number on the back of this sheet before you do anything else. There were 14 rules in total. I read them all twice, told myself the previous keeper had probably been unhinged from too many solitary winters, tucked the paper back under the foghorn manual, and went about setting up my new life. That was 14 months ago. I am writing this now because of what happened 3 weeks ago, and what I discovered 2 days after that, and because I have not slept more than 90 minutes at a stretch since, and I need someone else to know this before I lose the ability to tell it clearly. The first few months were uneventful in the way that only truly isolated places can be uneventful. The silence had texture. The darkness had weight. I learned the rhythm of the light, the deep mechanical rotation of the Fresnel lens, the way it threw its beam across the water in a sweep so regular it started to feel like a heartbeat. I did my logs. I maintained the equipment. I followed the operational guidelines from the official manual, and mostly tried to forget about the handwritten sheet with its 14 rules. Mostly. Because the knocking started on my 3rd night there. 2:47 in the morning. I was awake because I couldn't sleep, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a paperback I wasn't really reading, and something knocked on the cottage door. 3 knocks. Measured. Patient. The kind of knocking that wasn't frantic or urgent. The kind that knew you were home. I stood up before I even remembered Rule 4. My hand was already reaching for the door handle when the words came back to me. Do not open it. Do not speak through it. Do not look through the window beside it. Sit in the center of the room and wait until it stops. I don't know why I listened. Instinct, maybe. Or the particular quality of those 3 knocks. Something subtly wrong about the spacing, something that my body registered before my mind could argue. I stepped back. I sat down on the floor in the center of the room, not even in a chair, just cross-legged on the cold stone floor, and I waited. The knocking came again at 3:15, and again at 3:40, and then at 3:59 it stopped, and at 4:01 I got up and turned on every light in the cottage and didn't sleep until the sun was fully up. I never looked out the window. I want to be clear about that. I followed the rule completely. But the next morning when I went outside, there were no footprints in the mud around the door. The path to the cottage from the access road was soft from 2 days of rain, and there was nothing. No marks. No sign that anyone had stood there. I called the number on the back of the handwritten sheet. It rang 11 times and disconnected. I tried again. Same thing. I logged the knocking in my personal notes and told myself it was the wind, some trick of pressure and architecture. The building settling. Old stone buildings make sounds. I had read that somewhere. The knocking came every few nights after that, always between 2 and 4, always in sets of 3, always that same patient, unhurried rhythm. After the first month, I stopped sitting on the floor and just stayed in my chair and waited. After the second month, I barely woke up for it. You can normalize almost anything if it follows a pattern. It was in month 4 that I first saw the ship that wasn't on the radar. Clear night, good visibility, seas running moderate. I was in the lamp room doing my hourly visual sweep when I saw her. A fishing trawler, maybe 60 feet, running lights on, moving parallel to the coast about a half-mile out. Nothing unusual except that the radar screen showed nothing. Flat, empty. No return at all where that ship was absolutely, visibly sailing. I remembered rule 2. I counted to 3. Looked back. She was still there. I logged the time, 2:18, her approximate heading, her size and configuration, and the radar reading. Then I made myself focus on the light mechanism and not look at the water for the rest of my shift. In the morning I checked the Coast Guard vessel tracking database that all registered keepers have access to. Nothing matched her description in that area that night. No trawler of that configuration had filed a float plan for those waters. I added the entry to my log and tried not to think too hard about what that meant. The voice on channel 16 came 2 weeks later. I was monitoring the radio the way I always did, half listening over the sound of the wind, when the static shifted in a way I can only describe as deliberate, and a man's voice said, quietly and clearly, "This is the Mara Ilan. Can you hear me?" My hand moved toward the transmit button automatically. I am a lighthouse keeper. A vessel calls, I respond. That is the job. But Rule 3 was already firing in my head. If a voice comes through on channel 16 that you do not recognize, and it gives you a name, do not repeat the name aloud. The ship's name. It had given me a ship's name. I pulled my hand back from the transmit button. I picked up my pen and wrote in the log 147 hours. Channel 16. Voice male calm. Vessel identified as. And I wrote the name in the log without speaking it. Then I closed the log. I turned the radio volume down but did not turn it off, because I needed to hear if a real distress call came through. The static held that different quality for another hour, like something was pressing against the other side of it. And then it normalized around 3, and by morning I had almost convinced myself I'd imagined the deliberateness of it. I did not open that log again until Sunday morning. When I did, the entry was there, the time, the channel, the description of the voice, exactly as I had written it. But the name of the vessel had changed. I had written Mara Ilan. What was in the log now was a different name entirely. 7 letters. A name I didn't recognize and won't write here. I called the number on the back of the sheet for the second time. It rang 11 times and disconnected. I want you to understand the specific quality of the fear I felt in that moment, because it wasn't like fear in the movies. It wasn't loud or electric. It was quiet and cold and total, like standing in a room and realizing very slowly that the walls have been moving closer for a very long time, and you only just noticed. I sat with that log open in front of me and I breathed very carefully, and I thought about every rational explanation I could construct. I had misread what I wrote. I had written the wrong name by mistake. The ink had smeared, and I was misreading it now. I had been more tired than I realized. None of those explanations stayed solid for more than 30 seconds. I kept keeping. What else was I going to do? I was 3 hours from the nearest town on a bad road. I had a job. I had my logs and my light and my protocols, and the honest truth is that the rules had kept me safe so far, or at least they had kept nothing bad from happening, which I was choosing to treat as the same thing. Then, 3 weeks ago, on a night of heavy fog and 6-foot swells, a ship called in. Real radio contact, proper maritime procedure. A cargo vessel called the Solis Verity, captain's name Aldrich Fenn, reporting navigation difficulties in the fog. She was running too close to the shelf. I had her on radar. Clear return, good signal. I talked her in over the course of 90 minutes, correcting her heading, marking the safe channel, keeping her voice steady when the swells pushed her toward the rocks. It was the most intense 90 minutes of my career, and when she finally cleared the point and her lights vanished into the safer water to the south, I sat down and realized my hands were shaking. I logged the whole thing. Solis Verity, Captain Aldrich Fenn. Time of first contact, time of safe passage, weather conditions. I was thorough. I was proud of it, actually. Whatever else this job had put me through, I had just guided a vessel and her crew safely through a dangerous stretch in terrible conditions. That meant something to me. The following Sunday I reviewed the log as required by Rule 6. My entry for the Solis Verity was there, exactly as I wrote it. I noticed nothing wrong until the following Sunday, when I reviewed the log again, and something made me check against the Coast Guard database, the way I had been doing since the radar, invisible trawler. Force of habit, cross-referencing. The Solis Verity appeared in the database. She appeared as a vessel reported lost at sea with all hands. Disappeared in a North Atlantic storm. The date of her loss was listed as 2 months before the night I talked her through the fog. I read the entry 4 times. I checked the vessel name, the registration, the captain's name, Aldrich Fenn, reported among the lost. I found the Coast Guard report. I found the brief news article. A cargo vessel. 7 crew. No survivors. No wreckage recovered. Presumed sunk in heavy weather on a date that was 60. 3 days before, I heard his voice on Channel 16 telling me calmly that he was having navigation difficulties in the fog. I sat in that cottage for a long time after that. The light swept its beam across the water outside. The Atlantic moved the way it always moves, indifferent and enormous and very old. I thought about Captain Fenn's voice, how steady it was, how he thanked me when I told him he'd cleared the point. How he said, quietly, before the connection ended, "You're the first one who's answered in a long time." I thought about that handwritten list of rules and the person who wrote them. And I wondered how long they had kept this light, and what they had seen, and whether they had managed to leave. I called the number on the back of the sheet a 3rd time that night. It rang 11 times. And then, for the first time, someone picked up. There was no voice. Just the sound of wind, and very faintly beneath it, something that might have been breathing. And in the background, unmistakably, the slow rhythmic sweep of a lighthouse beam clicking through its rotation. I hung up. I have not called again. I still keep the light. I still follow the rules. All 14 of them, more carefully now than ever, because I understand something about them now that I didn't when I first read them. They aren't there to protect the ships. The ships are going to do what ships do, and some of them are going to find this light no matter what, and some of those ships left the world of the living a long time ago. The rules are there to protect the keeper. To keep me on this side of whatever line it is that separates the night I live in from the night that Captain Fenn and his crew are still sailing through. I guide them when they call. I follow the protocols. I do not open the door between 2 and 4. I do not repeat names aloud. I do not look too long at the ships that cast no radar return, because I think if I look long enough, I might start to see the details that aren't right. The waterline, the rust patterns, the way the crew on the deck doesn't move the way living people move. I still hear the knocking every few nights. Patient. 3 beats. Waiting. Last Tuesday I went to the door because I was tired and afraid and desperately, stupidly lonely. And I stood with my hand on the handle for almost 2 full minutes before I made myself walk away and sit down in the center of the room. Whatever is on the other side of that door has learned to wait. And I think it has been waiting for a very long time. And I think it has learned that patience is the one thing the keepers always run out of eventually. I have not run out yet. But I want you to know this happened. I want someone on shore, someone in the living world with traffic and grocery stores and other people's voices, to know that the light at Halverson Point is kept by a man who is doing his best to follow the rules, and that some nights the rules are the only thing standing between me and whatever it is that the ocean has been sending to this shore for longer than anyone still alive can remember. If you ever see a light on a dark coast, know that someone is up there turning it. Know that the job costs something. And if you're ever on the water and you hear a keeper's voice guiding you through the fog, answer them. Say thank you. Let them know you heard them. Some of them have been trying to get an answer for a very long time. If you could choose any isolated job, lighthouse keeper, night security, forest ranger, which would you pick? And do you think you could follow the rules